Live on YouTube, we're going to be able to start our episode. And it looks like we are now live on YouTube, which is great. And again, okay, you are watching Radical Age Reversal. We have two audiences with us, our YouTube audience and our Win 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 audience. So I just want to thank everybody for joining me today. Again, my name is Carrie Donegan. The show that I do is called Radical Age Reversal. It was started by my dear business partner and friend, Denise Schwindeman, and I when we realized that we were in the second half of our life and we wanted that second half to be as good as the first, if not better. And we looked back and realized that along the way, maybe we didn't make the best choices, and that going forward, we were going to make sure that we were going to make better choices, which is key to being intentional. And that's what we're really talking about today, how to be completely intentional with your life. And for those of you who feel like the second half of life feels like it's too big to focus on, what I want you to do is actually call this goal, this destination, the final chapter. Now, depending on whose studies you look at, it seems that for most people, this final chapter of life can last somewhere between 10 and 20 years. And as longevity increases due to a whole host of factors, it could be better financial ability, it can be drug interaction, medical interaction, whatever it is. We know that our lifespans can increase quite a bit. But in increasing lifespan, what we haven't seen coordinated is an increase in health span. So, for some people, actually, for a majority of Americans now, what they're looking at is a 10 to 20-year period of life, which could be in a state of disease or in chronic ailments. And that isn't exactly the chapter that we're looking for. And I call that growing old. Nobody really wants to grow old. And let's think for a minute of the associations that we think of when we think of growing old. A lot of us think of wrinkles and gray hair and aches and pains and taking a lot of pills and having to use devices like canes and walkers and wheelchairs. For some people, it may be losing their eyesight, losing their ability to eat, losing the health of their teeth. It could also be that they feel like they lose their independence. They're no longer able to do the things that they were able to do before, from running their own household to driving a car. And it is, a fact of life that we will all come to a point, right, where we will need some type of assistance or intervention, which is why people usually plan for those things financially, right? Whether it's through powers of attorney, whether it's through having a living will, whether you have someone who's a medical proxy, whether you have someone who's a guardian for you, those kinds of things are always good because we always plan to be, people plan to retire, which means that they believe that they're going to grow old gracefully and slowly go into these reduced abilities. But also, you can have an event, right? Something that you're not planning for, and that can cause a disability. And disabilities can last many, many years. Young people who are born with disabilities, we know, have to face those challenges for the rest of their life. But for those of you who are watching this and you're in relatively good health and you're looking at that second phase of your life or the final chapter of your life, depending on how many years you want to put in that group, you want to be able to be the architect to the greatest extent possible of what those years are going to look like. So today we're going to focus on three different things. We're going to talk about time, we're going to talk about money, and we're going to talk about relationships and how those factor into our health span, our quality of life. So, when we started this show almost 2 years ago, one of our main focuses came out of a study that was from the American Heart Association, I believe, in July of 2021 or 2022. I'd have to look that up. Now, it's been a couple of years. And what it said basically was that 96% of Americans were in poor cardiometabolic health, and that being in poor cardiometabolic health led to a long, long list of diseases, conditions that could lead to mortality, right? Could lead to death, but more often could lead to some type of lack of vitality. And so we did a really, really big focus on trying to help you get into really good cardiometabolic health. And then this past year, the big news in healthcare was on the microbiome and what role the microbiome played. And most of us, myself included, learned that actually we're only 10% human, and 90% of our body is this massive, massive microbiome structure that's filled with fungus and bacteria and other microbes that actually run our health. And so taking care of that the way you would take care of a pet is super important. So with those two things in mind, from a healthcare standpoint, I want you to look at the three factors that really play the greatest role in you growing up as opposed to growing old. Now, when I'm focusing on something, I think it's really important that we define the terms before we move into an area. Because for some of you, when you hear those words grow up, maybe it's sort of a negative thing. Maybe when you were a young person and you were being irresponsible, somebody said, "Oh, why don't you grow up?" Or when you wanted to do something fun and you were just being joyful and childlike, somebody said, "Why don't you grow up?" And so the concept of growing up has a very negative view to it. For some of you, you see those words separately and two positives. You see growth as something that you really want to focus on. You have a growth mindset. You like to grow things. Maybe you like have plants or kids or animals, whatever it is. And growth to you sounds great. And the word up sounds wonderful, right? So it's about moving forward. It's about expanding. It's about achieving. It's about receiving. It's about heightened spirituality, whatever up means to you. So, in the terms that we're going to talk about today, I want to talk about grow up in a really positive way. It means that you're going to grow into the person that you were born to be, that all your gifts were designed to create, and that you're manifesting and magnifying all of those things to the greatest extent possible. That to me is what being grown up means. It means that you've taken everything that you've been given and everything that you've learned and everything you have access to, and you use it to the greatest possible ability for the greatest possible good. That is a grown up. Now, a grow old is the opposite of a grown up. A grow old is someone whose choices may have actually had a negative effect, right? So perhaps it was someone who worked too much, didn't get enough sleep. And this is not a judgment zone. That's not what this is about. This is about learning to discern what's going on in your life and making really good intentional choices. So growing old can exhibit itself in a physical way, right? What we were talking about earlier, wrinkles and graying and feeling old and acting old. I work with a lot of young people, and I can share with you that they talk like people who've grown old. They're in pain, they have inflammation, they're overweight, they don't have energy, they can't really sleep, their hormones are out of balance. These are things that we used to hear much older people talking about, and we would expect in someone much older. To hear that from someone who's in their teens or their 20s, to see people who are very, very young chronologically dealing with diseases of old age, with experiences of old age, depression, anxiety, things that young people should not be holding onto or living through. Those are grown old issues. And what's happened is the gifts, the talents, the joys, the purpose of why you are here now are not being fully utilized. They're not being energized. They're not being connected with. There's no intentional connection with those things anymore. I think we spend a lot of time on this area of self help, but we really don't know what it is that we even need to focus on, right? We might grab a book here or listen to someone who's considered to be an expert there. And yet, if we don't understand our own self, our own gifts and talents, where we are right now, what we have access to, what we can manifest with our own creator, right? What was given to us, not what was given to other people, but what was given to us, it makes it very, very hard to know what direction you're supposed to be going in. And so I think sometimes we go along with the crowd, right? So if everyone, when we're younger, is drinking a lot, then we tend to drink a lot, not thinking about the effects of that. Or if we know people who eat a lot of fast food, a lot of um, sugary drinks, right? So we get into kind of these trends, right? One of the scariest trends that I saw when I was a high school teacher about 6 or 7 years ago started was vaping and energy drinks, but filled with caffeine and high levels of sugar. And I just knew, given my basic understanding of science and nutrition and physiology, that that was not going to be a good long-term solution for anyone. It's going to have a big fallout. And so when I try to be intentional about what I'm doing, I look at the fallout from a lot of these things. And even if you do them occasionally, you have to remember that even occasional use of something that's not serving you is going to work against you. Now, in the world, there has to be a certain amount of balance. I've heard people refer to the 80-20 rule quite a bit, right? So 20% of the time, I may let myself slip a little bit, but 80% of the time, I'm really, really focused and I'm sticking to my plan. I'm sticking to my diet. I'm sticking to my exercise regime. I'm sticking to the hydration program that I have committed to. And then every once in a while, I slip off. I'd like to move that to between 90 and 10 and 95 and 5. And here's why. I feel like the things that work against us, that push us into growing old, have a twofold exponential effect, especially now for my audience. And that is number one, when you get older, you are less resilient. Just imagine a rubber band. Your life, your body is a rubber band. And when the rubber band is brand new and you are pulling on that rubber band constantly, it's going to be fine. But as that rubber band ages, right? Like if you ever left a rubber band out in the cold, it can kind of break. Or if you leave a rubber band in the heat, it kind of disintegrates, right? So the outside environment has an effect on the rubber band, just like the outside environment has an effect on you. And so as we're aging, our rubber bands, right, are being pulled, and they're getting older and they're being exposed to things, and eventually they snap. And so what we used to be able to do when the rubber bands were young didn't have that immediate effect, right? You could recover, you could get drunk, have a hangover, but recover. You could go back to work, you could go back with your life. As you get older, you can see a much, much more profound effect. And I'm just talking about one particular thing that doesn't serve us. There are many, 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 many. So we have to be able to, at this stage of life, analyze all of the things that we're doing and be intentional with them. Does this activity, this behavior, connect with my final chapter? All right. So let's build it backwards, because I always think if you want to get somewhere, you have to start with the end in mind. And the end is going to be the final chapter, our legacy. What are we intending to leave behind in the world? Now, you may say, quite frankly, most people are not remembered beyond 2 generations. And that's true. However, we have to remember the effect our life has on those around us. So it's not necessarily about whether there's going to be a statue of you someday, or your name's going to be on a building, or you're going to leave behind so many articles of material goods that everybody's going to remember you when they look at these things. That's not the point. The point is that our actions, our behaviors have an effect on the younger people around us, other people around us, and they carry our legacy forward with them because we're shaping who they are. And it's more, much, much, much more beyond whether you're just a parent, right? So parents are not the only human beings that affect other people. We affect our friends, we affect our neighbors, we affect strangers in ways that we don't even realize. Working in retail, I've had some experience doing that. And I see other people who will say, a customer came in and they were so generous, so kind, so complimentary, and how that literally changed that person's day. Or you can have someone who says, they were abusive and angry, and that can have a negative effect on that other person's day. We have to remember that each human being that we interact with, we are creating our legacy in them by the effect that we have on them. So let's just start to talk about the three areas where I feel like we have to be most intentional when it comes to our final chapter of life, or really any chapter of life, and how we can be more intentional in those areas. So the three areas are money, which really represents transactions. Okay. Money is really a means to an end. And so in that category, we can put some other things, but I think for point of clarification, using the money is probably the easiest one, especially in this day and age. The second is going to be time, and how important time is and how our use of time is. And then the third one I want to talk about is relationships. Now, we may not get through all of these, but I think it's important for us to start working through this process and taking a deep dive into them. And today, I'm just going to do a general overview. And then in future episodes, we're going to take a deeper dive. But let's look at each one. And as I said before, let's define the terms. All right. So, money. Money is a means to an end. And I will share with you a story that I had recently with someone. I don't want to name them because to protect the innocent, but they were very, very responsible. And they had this one moment of temptation where they were outside at a street carnival and they thought they could win a game, like one of these games they're clearly rigged. Like we know that, gambling casinos and all of those things, it's always going to favor the house, right? It's always, otherwise they wouldn't do it, right? What's in it for them? I always ask that. I do that with pharmaceuticals. I do that with food. I do that with housing, whatever it is. The person who's exchanging that with me, right? The person who's trying to sell something to me, that's trying to attract my attention to get my money. What is in it for them, right? What is their intention? What is their goal? Now, for a lot of places, their intentions are really, really good. There's some phenomenal companies doing phenomenal work in countries around the world. So it's not all bad. It's a neutral question. The question is, what is their intention? Some intentions are good and some intentions are bad. And you have to know when you're exchanging your money what that intention is. So let's go back to my friend's story. So they got lured into this little gambling game thinking that they were going to win $100. And lo and behold, they lost the $100. And the first thing that they felt was stupid, right? They felt that they were cheated, that they were going to win, that they understood what was happening. And yet they got lured into this game of chance. And what I said to them afterwards was, first and foremost, did you learn anything? And not that, oh, you're stupid, why did you do that? Right. But so what did you learn from that situation? Because I think every aspect of life is an opportunity to learn. And if we don't stop and think of what the lesson might be, because that's a gift, right? If we fail, and we learn something, we actually get something. I know a lot of people think of failure as like a zero-sum game, but actually in failure, you have the potential to gain the most. In success, you really have the potential to gain a moment of, I don't know, a feeling of accomplishment maybe, or relief, but then it's over. It's, success is actually very fleeting, but failure can stay with you for a long time because it brings with it a gift, and the gift is in the form of learning something. Okay. So I said to my friend, "What did you learn?" And they said, "Well, I learned to trust my instincts and my knowledge that I knew this was a bad idea. I didn't follow those things. So I have to rely more on that inner voice that says gambling is not going to serve me, and that this is, an easy way to lose $100." And I said, "Well, I want you to think of one more thing. I want you to think of the fact that maybe that $100 was never meant to be yours. And in the great unknown, ununderstood way that things transfer in the universe, that that money somehow was passed on to someone else for their option. That was a gift to them. All right. So if you lost, they won. Remember, I said success is fleeting. So when we gain something, when we achieve something, when we earn something, we still have to be intentional about what we do with it. So perhaps the person who was running the little gambling game needed that money for support of their family. Even though my friend felt stupid, and even though my friend felt duped, the idea that that money could be going to something of value did bring her an element of peace. And I think it's important, since we are transient beings, we don't stay here forever, that ownership is really a very nebulous concept, right? That what we actually own, we don't. We may possess it for a short period of time, but then it's always transferring somewhere. But when we're intentional about our money, then we understand that we are playing a more deliberate role in where it transfers to and how it may tie into our end goal. So would it have made my friend happier to take that $100 and donate it to a charity? Probably, even if in a sense what happened when she lost the $100 was that it was given away, right? It was given away. Just like when we purchase something from a company, we give it away in exchange for, right, the good or service that we receive from that company. So just being more intentional with our money, which may mean a budget, which may mean being more thoughtful, using maybe fewer credit cards, things that make the transfer of money too easy, that we lose that moment to stop and think about where this money is going and how it works. I know some people who work on just a cash basis because they know when they open their wallet and they start to see those bills go down, it really, really has a profound effect on them as to, should I be spending this or not? So whatever you do, there's the concept that in the world of exchange, and I really don't want to focus on money as money, because I think focusing on money as money can actually put people in the wrong direction, right? You can grow old, you can become like an Ebenezer Scrooge, where you're like super greedy and always thinking about money and where you're using it. That's not going to be helpful for you. But you have this object, almost like a ticket, right? That's a means of exchange. And how are you using that ticket in that moment? For what purpose? Being more intentional. The second thing is relationships. How intentional are you with your relationships? Now, there's two books I want to draw your attention to. One is called Young Forever. We're starting our book club with this book. And if you're interested in the book club, go ahead and put it in the comments section, and I will share with you how to join our book club. It's actually tonight. It's every Monday night at 7 o'clock. We meet on Zoom. We do just a couple of chapters. It's not a demanding reading, but the discussions are really lively and really interesting. And I'm excited about this book because he talks a lot about blue zones and why the people in the blue zones are really happy about their lives and why their lives are fulfilled and why the final chapter of their lives are actually so much better than the final chapter of the lives that we see in America, one of the sickest countries on the planet. So we can learn a lot from people around the world who are doing things differently. Really, really love this. The second person or author I want to draw your attention to is a man named Simon Sinek. And his theory, and you can, of course, take this or leave it, is that you can really only keep up with about 14 people on a regular basis. And so making sure you're choosing those 14 people intentionally, right? That you're surrounding yourself with those 14 people who really will feed your spirit, feed your life, who will also offer you like a fraternal correction, right? Will tell you, you know what, you're going in the wrong direction right now, and I'm concerned for you. Who can say that in words where you can hear them and that you can accept it out of love and gratitude and actually think about how you can be open to change, because that person offered you that advice and love, and that you too can in turn offer with love advice and guidance and support to the people around you. Now, I also have listened to people like Eric Worre who say we should be connecting with one new person a day in our life, and he says that using text messaging in the modern age is a really, really powerful tool. So what he says is, every day pick a person and send them a message and try to connect with them. And you may hear from them immediately. You may hear from them 2 days from now. You may not hear from them at all. But to start conversations every day. Now, that would be 365 conversations, which for some people may feel overwhelming. So somewhere, but I'm giving you kind of two sides of the spectrum, but the message is the same. The message is we really do want to connect with people in a more intentional way. And then the third one, and I think I have to plug in before I lose my power here, is, I'm so sorry. I'm looking at that little red light blinking, is that we should be, there it is, wrong one. The third one, sorry about that, is time. And time takes planning. So here's a perfect example of planning. I did not plan to plug in my computer before I started this show. And so there you go. My poor planning, and it took away the time from what I wanted to share with you because I had to plug that in. But hopefully now it's not working, which is another concerning thing, but that's okay. Hopefully we'll get through the show before, there we go. That time is of extreme value, and that we should be intentional with our time. And unfortunately, our time is out. So like I said, we're going to take a deep dive. We're going to do a whole episode on money, a whole episode on relationships, and a whole episode on time. And these 3 episodes that are coming next are going to help you to grow up, right? To grow your life in a more intentional, purposeful, exciting way. And that we are not going to grow old, right? We are not going to have those things actually take away from our vitality, take away from our lifespan, take away from our health span. We're going to talk about how to make those things actually increase your health span and your lifespan. So I thank you so much for your time and your interest. This is given freely, right? So there is no money exchange here. So I hope that you will take some time to think about some of the topics that we've broached today, what it means to be intentional. Maybe what would be super cool is to connect with another person today or tomorrow. Do it soon and talk to them about how intentional they are with their time, their money, and their relationships, and just start a really good discussion. Don't do it on social media. do it in person, right? Have a really intentional personal conversation. We know that face to face human interaction is one of the keys to longevity and health span and lifespan. And if you have a chance and you can join us for our book club tonight, we would love to have you. Until then, I'm Carrie Donegan. God bless, and I'll see you next week.